open the meeting back up. I was just waiting for Marilyn.
I hear her.
There she is. I hear her shoes too. All right. It's time now for our informal review of just the preliminary staff determination on Dan McGee. So I'm going to let you take over this.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. So I apologize for the last minute addition of this to your agenda, but it is time sensitive with respect to the pending employment offer Mr. McGee has with the Office of Public Instruction. So I'll just sort of at a high level explain what the issue is, and then I think we should give Mr. McGee the opportunity to speak to the board, and then the board can ask questions as they see fit. So, in short, Mr. McGee is currently on paid administrative leave through a settlement agreement that he had with his previous employer, which was Prior Public Schools. He's on paid administrative leave through June 30th, 2017. And we've reviewed that settlement agreement. We've communicated to Mr. McGee that that's acceptable for TRS, that he will get service credit and reportable salary for the remainder of fiscal year 17 for his paid administrative leave with Prior School District. That's a long-standing practice that TRS has had in place, and it's something that we've always honored in the past, is if there is an administrative leave issue, did she try to call back?
She did, and I told her it would be 5 more minutes, so she'll probably
wait?
be calling in momentarily.
Okay. All right. No, I'm sorry.
We can call
Well,
her.
it'll be, she'll be able to
everything.
review it on
Yeah.
video,
Mhm.
so we may as well keep moving. It's nice thing, where was
sorry.
I? That's okay.
I just kind of panicked
It's
when I
well,
didn't see a
I
light.
guess it's a long-standing practice. We've always honored that, but only for the current fiscal year. So if it doesn't matter if you're on paid administrative leave beginning in September, or you're on paid administrative leave beginning in February, we're going to honor that paid administrative leave status through the end of the current fiscal year, with the notion that for most people, if you're on paid administrative leave partway through a school year, it's going to be very difficult for you to go find another job in a TRS reporting position during that year. So we sort of take litigating for retirement purposes, whether or not someone was, if they didn't get as much service credit as they should have or shouldn't have due to a settlement or an employment dispute, we sort of just take that off the table by giving credit during this administrative leave period. With that, we've always communicated to our members that are on paid administrative leave status that if they are to go back to work during that time period for a different TRS employer in a TRS reportable position, that it's going to essentially negate the administrative leave status of what they have with their other employers. So whatever they go to do then would be the only compensation that would be reportable to TRS. So that's how we've always treated them in the past. I've sort of laid out the issue. Denise and I did. Denise worked on this, the preliminary staff determination that lays out each of the facts as they're known to TRS today, as well as the position of TRS staff. And then I very high level paraphrase what Mr. McGee's argument is in my summary there on, which is, I believe, and we'll let him speak, but essentially is, why is this employment for 2 employers, even though one of them's in an administrative leave status? Why is that any different than any other active TRS member that's working for more than one TRS employer and potentially more than 1.00 FTE, even though our statutes cap your FTE status at 1.00 irregardless. So I guess, I'll let Mr. McGee talk, but the board really has a few options. I mean, you can stand by the staff decision as it's written now, depending on what you hear and what you discussed today. You could decide to do something different. If you decide to do something different, a couple things that are important to note. Our statute does cap service at 1.00, so whether you legitimately are 1.00 FTE with one employer and another 0.5 FTE with another employer, you're limited for TRS purposes to 1.00 addition to that, there's the 110% cap on salary that would apply in this case. So if it's found that both salaries should be reported to TRS, we're going to limit the salary for fiscal year 17 at 110% of whatever fiscal year 16 salary was. Anything above that 110% cap would be reported to TRS as excess. It would be counted as excess earnings. We would collect contributions on it, and then when Mr. McGee goes to retire, it would be used as termination pay option 2, which so you take whatever that amount is and you spread it across all his years of service credit for calculation of this highest average compensation. So with that, that's sort of the background of the issue. Madam Chair, I can say that a case like this has never risen to the level of board review or board discussion. You know, both Scott and you have been on the board for quite some time. We've always communicated it this way in the past, and our members have, for whatever reason, have never gone forward outside of the administrative leave. So it's never risen to board review.
Yes.
We're back now.
Okay, thank you. I'll put myself on mute.
Okay. Diane, we have kind of just, Sean has kind of just given us some background information so far. Okay? We have Dan McGee is here as well, and he's going to speak shortly.
Okay, thank you.
So with that, I guess I would leave it to the chair, whether you want the board to ask questions of me right now, or you want to give Mr. McGee the opportunity to speak first, and then we have the board discussion questions.
I think we should let Mr. McGee have his.
Okay, I can stand if you'd like, since.
You can
kind of the
sit
back
if you'd
of-
like as well, but whatever
No,
you're
I'm-
most
I'm good
comfortable.
standing. Hello, I'm Dan McGee. I'm the superintendent of Pryor Schools, and I've been there since 2011. And about a year ago, a couple of my board members committed discrimination acts against me and other staff members. So I filed a complaint with the Human Rights Bureau, and they found in my favor, and they also found retaliation. And so that decision came in September, I guess it was. And at that time, the board had an opportunity to respond, and they did not. And then it went to a hearing, and the hearing was scheduled for early December. And in the meantime, the new board chair decided to settle with me rather than to go to the hearing, for probably very obvious reasons. And so at that time, we came up with a settlement agreement. The school district attorney and myself and the board chair came to an agreement, and part of the agreement was to pay me out of my contract. I have a 3-year contract, so they purchased that and put me on administrative leave for the remainder of this year, just as Sean had said. And so I guess my case might be a little bit different because I'm on administrative leave because of actions of my board, not because of actions that I have done. And Pryor was a school of promise, and since the time I was there, we made tremendous gains. In fact, we would not qualify as a school of promise any longer. And so there is an opportunity to be a transformational leader for another district in the state at Hayes. And so when I left, I was approached by Mandy Smoker to see if I would be interested in working in Hayes. And so, and obviously I would. It's work that I really enjoy doing. And as far as the compensations for TRS, my settlement agreement with Pryor puts me at the 110%. So all of my TRS contributions would go there. I'm not asking for any additional ones to come from this new position. I'm just asking for the opportunity to work.
I guess I don't understand.
Madam Chair and Marilyn, so one of the things that Mr. McGee proposed here in the last week, as we've been talking through this with him, is that for TRS purposes, we sort of just don't even consider the OPI salary. But that would not be a recommendation. I think you as a board would need to, at some point, whether it's today or at our next meeting, need to decide either all of the compensation is reportable to TRS, or if he goes, or you stick with the staff determination. So the two choices essentially are both the wages and compensation from Pryor School District, which is part of the administrative leave agreement, that is reportable to TRS, and then if Mr. McGee takes this job with OPI, that whole salary would also be reportable to TRS, and contributions would come to TRS. They're both TRS employers. He would actually be providing service for OPI, so I don't think we would want to ever land in a place where we said, no, that salary's not reportable at all to TRS, because he's providing service. They're a TRS employer, and that's a TRS reportable position. So those are kind of the options. You can either sort of stand behind the staff's determination that once you start the OPI position, you're no longer, for our purposes, employed by prior school district, or we can land in a place where we say, no, they're both reportable to TRS, subject to the 110% cap and subject to the 1.00 FTE cap.
Were you paid from prior with a lump sum payment, or are you being paid monthly?
There was a lump sum component, but I'm still paid monthly for the remainder of this year as the salary. So
Up to the whole school year, we're talking.
up to this whole school year.
Okay.
The future part of my second, third year, that was a lump sum.
I understand.
And TRS's position, or the staff position, is that if I take the job at OPI, then I lose the retirement benefit from prior, which I wouldn't be willing to do.
Wouldn't you get the retirement benefit for the months until you take the job with OPI?
Yeah, so the compensation paid up to this point that's been reported to TRS would count. It's just
Right.
whenever Mr. McGee, if once he starts working for OPI from that point forward, only the OPI salary would be reportable, which in this case, the salary from
Got it.
OPI, without getting into actual numbers, the salary from OPI is considerably lower than the salary that will be reported from prior school district.
And the prior one would be the third year of my highest 3 years, when I do get around to retiring.
So isn't this all solved if we just gave him the 110% limitation? So he got credit for the salary from the previous position at prior and then started after that period? That doesn't work, Denise?
No, I'm not, that's not,
Go ahead and finish your thought.
Well, I'm just, like Marilyn, I'm just trying to understand what the real issue is here. Is what Mr. McGee is asking for, what he prefers would be to get credit for both salaries simultaneously. That would be optimum, agreed.
Yeah.
But that doesn't seem fair based on our rules. But we also don't want to penalize him for taking a new position, it seems. So is there a way to give him credit for the higher salary until that period would have ended anyway, and then let the OPI salary take over in terms of the creditable amount?
Madam Chair and Dan, I don't think we want, if we're going to say it's okay to go back to work during the time period you're on a paid administrative leave, then I think we just wanna simply do that, and then we would collect contributions on both salaries. I don't think we wanna try to say the part of the salary from one doesn't count. I mean, it's either,
Okay.
it's either gonna be allowable or it isn't. And I have to tell you, I really did struggle with this situation, and I came very close a couple different times of just making this decision at the director level that they're both reportable to TRS. We're gonna, you're subject to the cap on compensation, and you're subject to the 1.00 FTE limitation. But I didn't do that just because there is potential for, once you do this in one case, you have to do it in all future cases. And in this case, there's no premeditation, there's not even a hint that any sort of scheming has been done. But once it's known that this can happen, that you can be on paid administrative leave and then also go work for another employer, it's possible, not likely, but possible that, an individual could set themselves up to have a sort of a wink and a nod agreement with their school board or whoever, and then go on paid administrative leave relatively very early in a school year, and then also have another position lined up and sort of, really spike their salary. However, it's gonna be limited by the 110% cap, so.
Is it possible that we make some kind of language that the reason for, if we were to choose to make the decision that you made, that it was because the administrative leave that was issued was due to a settlement, and that was the exception, exclusion? Is that possible?
I think that's almost always gonna be the case
Yeah,
if you're on
it
paid
is.
administrative leave.
Well, it could be determined by a judge, but
Okay.
um,
Sounds like a conundrum.
Yeah, really, for me, it comes down to, is this a scenario where we can get a pain in the door for salary spiking?
Right.
In some regards, I hate to see any doors open when we don't need to open them. So I have some issues with that. The thing that's unique in this is that he has an opportunity to engage in employment in something he's interested in doing through the office.
Right.
And that's a relatively unique scenario that I don't think we'll see in that situation. I don't know if there's any way we can put sideboards on this or not, but if we could, I'd like to.
Let me ask another question. What is the overlap now, the total overlap in time from the time the administrative leave ends? The new employment begins at whatever date. What date is
Monday,
that?
right?
Might be
The
Sunday.
5th. And then it would run through June 30th,
Right, so
Okay.
approximately
7 months.
all right. So what if you accept employment and give up your salary for those first 7 months?
I don't think you can do that. I don't think you can do that in state law. You can't just volunteer for work.
Okay.
I don't think you can do that.
Okay.
It's a TRS reportable position as
And
well.
you can't, the state
Yeah.
just
I mean-
can't, no, I don't think you can do
Okay.
that.
It's truly either he has the job with OPI or he doesn't.
Right.
And if it was me and it was gonna hurt me to take the job from OPI, then I wouldn't take it.
Okay.
But in this scenario, it's a little bit different than leaving my employment in the middle of the year, which I also have a problem with people leaving stuff in the middle of the year, so. I guess in some regards, while I have hesitations, I think this is, I don't see where statute limits participating in both positions at the same time. And without administrative rule dictating that, I'm a little bit hesitant to just say, well, no, you can't do that, because what's the option coming down the pike? He could come back and make a formal request for a hearing on the determination. And then if he doesn't like how that turns out, then he could take it to a hearing examiner. I'm not sure and correct me if I'm wrong in this, but I'm not sure we have a whole lot to stand on for saying no.
Could we get Denise to?
Yeah,
Go
that's
ahead.
why I looked at.
Marilyn has a question.
That's all right, go ahead Denise, and I would like to ask Mr. McGee a question again. Go
So,
ahead.
and as I explained this to Mr. McGee, and this is, we do have a basis for saying no, and the basis is that we have always construed our statutes, and I think it's based on black letter statutory language, that in order to be employed in a capacity eligible to participate in TRS, you have to actually be performing service in that position. That's what prevents our employers from just selling service time in the retirement system to somebody who's not entitled to have it. Now, in the circumstance of, and just quickly speaking to the concern that Diane raised earlier this morning, before there's a settlement agreement, while somebody is on administrative leave during an investigation, during negotiations to terminate employment, whatever, they are still employed as far as we're concerned. There's no question about that, and they get, as long as they continue to be compensated, they get paid for it. Under our new law, they will be able to purchase uncompensated leave time up to the point, us giving them the remainder of the calendar, the remainder of the fiscal year, once a settlement agreement is in place, is you have to sort of understand that for all intents and purposes, the employment is terminated at the time that settlement agreement is executed. There's really no expectation that they're going to provide any additional service for the compensation, but again, as Sean said, so that they don't have to litigate in circumstances where it's going to be very difficult for somebody to find a position for the remainder of the year, or that But I do want to say that I think that notion of our expectation is that you are performing service in a TRS reportable position is a very important position to maintain. So if we're going to make an exception in this case, we're going to want to draw it very narrowly, and because I can't tell you how many contested cases I've pursued from the very perspective of you have to be performing service. You don't get to just negotiate time in the retirement system.
But doesn't that happen all the time?
It does happen all the time, but that's exactly what I'm saying when.
So this is a change, because people that are current, we're not talking about Mr. McGee now.
Right.
We're talking about anybody who has a settlement agreement with the district. What I heard you just say, if I was correct, is that once the settlement is made, they're no longer part of TRS and contributing.
We absolutely could take that position under our statutes. Again, the allowing them to remain on administrative leave through the end of the current fiscal year is sort of an exception to our statutes that we make, because we know from history that it puts employers and members in a really difficult position to say, if you're gonna terminate their employment, you know, too bad from a retirement perspective when you're in the middle of a school year and it's gonna be very difficult for them to go out and find.
We have not been doing that. We have been giving them the full year, even though the
We have
settlement.
been, yes.
But you're asking now that we change that.
I'm not asking that you change that, absolutely not. No, this is just an additional circumstance where somebody then has sort of overcome that problem of not being able to find another job and has actually gone out and found employment in another TRS reportable position. And the question is, do you want to extend the exception that additional distance?
I guess I feel that, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I guess I feel that in our, so that you know, Mr. McGee, we deal with people, in my 14 years on the board, we've dealt with people who are trying to spike their salary. It's typically a superintendent who knows their way around things. It's never a teacher, you know, that's because they can't do that, they negotiate that way. So you are in a bad position right now because we see these doors open and we need to close them. We absolutely have to, it's our fiduciary responsibility. But I think that we've done that in a lot of ways. We've protected ourselves with the 110% cap. I think we've protected ourselves with that 1 year of service. You're not going to get a year and a half of service for working a full year and a half time. You know, I guess that's where I see this today. I don't know that, I always like to go with what the staff determines because I see that they know, they're the ones who are dealing with things on a daily basis. They see the people who call every single day and expect something for nothing. I talk to teachers all the time who want to know if they can buy their final 5 years of service. No, you haven't worked 5 years. So, you know, this is, we are in a conundrum here. And when you open the door, it's hard to close the door. So I think that, again, we're not even making necessarily an action today. We kind of need to tell our people that let's look into these scenarios. Let's figure out what would be the best. But the thing about it is that Dan needs to know. Is that where we're coming from today? Is that why we're here?
Essentially, so Mr. McGee can get some idea of which way the board is leaning on this issue.
I guess I want to ask Mr. McGee have we interpreted your request correctly?
Absolutely, you have, and I guess maybe if I can offer to close that loophole, part of the settlement when we agreed on my final year, that gave me the 110%. And so really all I'm asking is that counts towards my TRS final salary. And so no matter what I get paid from OPI, even though it goes into that pot, at no time am I asking for that to be added to my salary, to my contributions. So if that's the loophole you want, that if you leave mid-year, you're only entitled to the current contract that you're under with administrative leave.
Is that an option for us?
I don't
That's
think
not an
that's-
option.
That's problematic for.
That's a problem.
The decision really will need to come down to whether they're both reportable or we're still back with what we decided as staff previously, that no, once you take the second position, the first one's no longer reportable. And I think it has to be that clean.
I think they're both reportable, period. You're gonna work 2 jobs, you have to report these 2 jobs, and you're not gonna be able to take that, it's still just a year's service. You're still gonna be at the 10% count. That is gonna help you eventually, because it's gonna be your termination pay. But, you know, so that's where we come in.
Well, I guess part of where I'm coming from is that I don't want to discourage our members from actively engaging in trying to find additional employment at some point in time in this either. And I can certainly see where when we're talking about, especially a position at the office, it's considerably less than what they're making in the field. And so the financial motivation is not there in this situation.
Scott's comment about creating sideboards to make sure that this is kept very narrow, how difficult is that?
Well, I think if we are looking to move forward, if it's sort of what I'm gathering here, if we're looking to move forward by saying, yes, they're both reportable, I think at that point we should really lay out the whole process of administrative leave counting towards service credit for the current fiscal year. We should probably lay that out in administrative rule. Right now, if you were trying to find how we are awarding service credit and accepting contributions for paid administrative leave in statute or administrative rule, I don't think you would find much to go on. So we probably would want to promulgate an administrative rule that deals with both paid administrative leave as a whole, as well as what happens if you, during that paid administrative leave, you accept another position. I think we want to lay that out in administrative rule.
And specifically to your question, Janice, I would say that if the board's preference is that we not discourage members on administrative leave under a settlement agreement for the remainder of the current fiscal year from looking for other employment in TRS reportable positions, that's going to be more difficult sideboards to sort of create without muddying the waters for all other potential circumstances that would come up. If what you want to determine is that, and you know, I'm not saying that there isn't a basis here. Now, Mr. McGee was sent an email, I'm not certain that he received it, that told him he couldn't go back to, but there is nothing in our statutes or administrative rules that says, you know, when we make this exception for you, you can't go back to work in a TRS reportable position. It's something we communicate. So you certainly could make the determination that there was inadequate notice to Mr. McGee that that was a condition of this exception being made to him, and that you're going to make an exception for him and review the rest of the issue sort of in a broader context, not to see whether we can accomplish what Scott seems to be interested in accomplishing without creating problems.
Well, and even if all we do is review what we're doing with it and not make any changes, at least we've reviewed and we've determined that it's not, we don't see this as going to be a problem or whatever. We certainly could make recommendations in administrative rule, or we could do whatever it is we need to do. I guess my biggest concern is I don't want to see us back in a scenario where we're going through hearings and we're trying to enforce the rule of law when it's really maybe not really there.
That's right.
In some people's eyes, and that's my concern. In part of this, as well as I remember several previous scenarios where we had, the administrative leave option, and the worst thing that could happen to those people in some of those scenarios was not attempting to find employment when they had opportunities to find employment. And if we've got somebody that has 8 or 9 months before the next school year and they have opportunities to find employment, I'm not sure we want to discourage that whole lot. I'm not sure we can solve that problem necessarily, but in this scenario, I don't know that I guess just in my basis, I'd hate to discourage him from taking employment based on the fact that we have done this in the past, and that's the way it should be.
Do you have a feeling for where, I mean, it's not an action item. Would you like more of a,
It's not an action item.
would you like
Let
us
me
to give
just-
a preliminary?
Let me just sort of try to summarize what I think you've said in the direction I think the board is leaning, and then we can probably go from there. I guess what I'm hearing is, let me first say this, I think we're better off to look at this overall as a whole than we are to really speak about it in terms of just this specific case, because I think once you set the precedent, regardless of what the specifics are to Mr. McGee's case, once you set the precedent, that precedent should apply across the board. So it's not really specific in law. There's nothing that I know of that strictly prohibits both salaries being reportable to TRS. So I think what I'm hearing from you is, and there's also nothing that strictly prohibits someone on administrative leave from being employed in another TRS reportable position. That doesn't exist either. So I think what I'm hearing is that we should look towards promulgating an administrative rule or policy that basically lays out paid administrative leave, the fact that if we look at a settlement agreement at TRS and we approve the settlement agreement, and in that settlement agreement it says that you're gonna be on paid administrative leave through that rest of that fiscal year, that you would be awarded certain credible service based at the same level you were prior to the administrative leave. So if you're only a half-time FTE before you went on and paid administrative leave, you're only gonna get credit for up to a half an FTE for the remainder of that school year, and all the way up to 1.00. And your compensation will be reportable to TRS and will count as towards your average final compensation if that year is one of the three used to determine your AFC. But you also can, if you find another position for a TRS reportable or a TRS employer that's reportable to TRS, you would be allowed to take that, and your salary is not going to be limited. The only thing that the limits that would apply would be the 110% cap on earnings and the cap on creditable service for the year. Does that sound like what everyone's thinking? Okay, and I think without taking any action, Mr. McGee should have what he needs to know for Monday with that.
Do you feel like you've gotten an answer from us?
I think so. I mean, if that's how you guys feel. Yeah, my fear was that if I took it, then I would lose my credible service with prior. And that's what I was afraid of.
So this would mean that he'd be contributing to TRS from December on, but really not getting any credit for it.
Right.
Am I correct? I mean,
He's gonna
he gets credit, he'll get both.
both salaries.
But the
will be
110
reportable.
cap comes in there.
It does,
Right.
but then everything, so let's say Mr. McGee earns 30,000 with OPI between now and December. That 30,000 will get divided by his total
Right.
years of credible service, and then each of the year, essentially take that divided by however many years he retires with. That's what the bump to his average compensation will be.
Is that actuarially covered?
That's how all of our excess earnings is handled. I
Right,
mean,
and,
so
and
the
he
whole-
would have to pay the,
He'll pay employer or employee contributions
Right.
as he's earning it, and the
Mhm.
employer pays employer compensation or contributions as he's earning it. Yeah, it'll be used as current pay option too. Okay,
Thank you.
I think as a future item for us as staff, then we'll work on some administrative rules that sort of lay out this. We'll start as either administrative rules or board policy to raise this out on how administrative leave is treated by TRS and what limitations there are, and what will reflect this conversation today.
Is there, do we need a public comment for
I
that?
didn't list public comment on this because it's potentially what's potential contested case matter. I don't know that there's anything for me to ask for it.
Diane, would you like to speak on this?
Hold on, please.
And so this is Diane Flatwell from MEA MFT, just so
She's always the public in our meetings.
Probably changing that.
She's with her new grandchild.
Oh, nice.
Lost her.
Diane, are you there?
She may have had emergencies on her.
So where would your OPI position be?
In Hayes, partly from Billings and then traveling there once a week, twice a week, or once every 2 weeks.
Hayes is the lowest performing school in the state, and Dan turned around prior. It was previously the lowest performing school in the state.
I'm glad you were able to find something.
Thank you. Something I really enjoy doing, so worked out very well.
Good.
How many students in the school?
K-12, about 150,
How many of them are Native American?
99%.
Yeah.
Thunderbirds.
Good basketball team this year.
Cool. The girls or the boys?
Both.
It's hard to say whether we dropped her.
Go for their
Just
school
can't
colors.
call back in, or if
I've been
Are you-
one once. It used to be in District
Yeah.
9C.
Sean.
Diane's
on the front
She's on
line.
the line.
Yeah.
Oh, let me hang up with the.
Yeah.
Thank you. Or Lori.
I grew up on the high side, so.
Oh, that's-
Because there was a button.
Hi,
Yeah.
Diane.
I was thinking, no,
It'll
it'll
rain.
rain.
It'll rain first,
Oh.
so I'll have to answer this.
Hello, Diane.
Hi, sorry for that inconvenience. I intended to unmute and I terminated the call, I believe. I didn't make any comment other than I look forward to working with you on any administrative rules of policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Diane.
Well, thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
All right, well, we just need a motion for adjournment.
Oh, well, before, oh, we have one more.
Marilyn, oh, thank you so much for your service to the board.
This is hard.
I know, I didn't want you to go, so.
No, I really enjoyed this experience.
Thank you so much.
I feel like I've tried to do it, just about everything I ever wanted to do in education. Being on this board was sort of the cherry on top of it. And serving teachers across the state and working with professional staff and the great board who really cares about teachers, about retirement, and it's been an honor, a real honor. I wish you all the very best. You have good leadership, good staff, and I will miss it a great deal. Thank you. This is
Best of
very
luck.
special.
And we're just expecting you to move to the next stage and have our back.
No worry. I'm a teacher. I believe in public service. I believe in public employees and pensions. I know my mother had the dignity till her dying day of having her pension that took care of her to the end. It's pretty important.
Well, I want to thank you for everything you've done in education, because, like you said, you've gotten to do these things, but you have certainly helped education in the state. I mean, everything from your union work to your teaching, everything you've done. I aspire to be somebody like you.
So, thank you very much. I have a book for whoever's going to take my place. This is last meeting only. But the annual report is in here and a couple other things. So whoever takes over as representative for the Montana Board of Investments, I would ask you to have them look at that, and that'll give them a preview of
What's to come?
what's to come. And it does have the annual report, so it'll be helpful. Thank you very much. This is really special for Montana.
Well, we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Chairman votes aye, and Marilyn, we also have some.
We do.